Welcome to Dare, the show for startup leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs who dare to shape the future. Dare is brought to you by the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, OEN, and Darwaft, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare podcast is excited to welcome back Rick Turoczy to the show today. Rick has been on the show today because he's the co-founder of the Portland Incubator Experiment. He's been involved in a number of organizations that support entrepreneurs and startups in Oregon, including Built Oregon. And I think you're now acting as interim director of Built Oregon.
Yeah.
And so you've been involved in the scene here in Portland for a long time. And we're coming back to Rick because the work that he did with the Portland Incubator Experiment, or as we will call it in the show, PI, is changing in 2025. And so we'd love to hear about where PI has been and where PI is going. Welcome back, Rick.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. I always appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, both online and off. So thanks for having me. Yeah, 2025, going to be a new experiment for Pi. Like we always lean in to the experiment side of this project. And, it's really born out of the fact that the last version of this experiment, for whatever reason, market dynamics just seemed to stop being as effective as it once was. And so we took a hiatus. I threw a tantrum and took my ball and went home, and we had a hiatus in 2024. But during that time, I was doing a lot of customer discovery, analysis of the community, and research and conversations, just trying to figure out what was really needed next in Portland and how Pi might be able to serve those needs of the community.
Yeah. So just for those who don't know, could you briefly describe historically what Pi did in Portland and how it helped entrepreneurs? Just so
Sure.
people have some context for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks who aren't familiar with Portland, wedged between Seattle and San Francisco, which are obviously tech hubs and startup hubs, we always had a firm belief that Portland had the potential to be a startup hub as well. So Pi began as really just a group like co-working environment designed to focus on founders who are actively building something.
Mhm.
So it wasn't an idea, it wasn't something they might do. It was people who were heads down trying to build something. And eventually that concept evolved into what the industry now knows as a startup accelerator. So cohort-based model with, we'd bring in a group of companies once a year, provide them with workspace and mentorship and in the early days funding to really help them see if their idea had legs and could make it in the market. Over time, we continued to iterate on that model to figure out really what worked for, second tier metropolitan areas that might not have the same amount of capital and activity as larger metropolitan areas, and continued to just kind of refine our model based on that. And that largely is what most people know Pi as, is a startup accelerator program. But at its heart, it's always been this experiment. And it's really just been a community organizing tool disguised as a co-working space or a startup accelerator or what have you. And so what we're doing now is really getting back to that ethos of what does the community need? What can we do to provide support and infrastructure for that work? And really just explore the next iteration of Pi and what it could be for the community.
Right. Well, one thing that I know that both you and I know has really changed over the last 20 years or so is that the ability for non-technical or for a very small group of people to create something that looks pretty viable has changed. Back in the day, you had to raise quite a bit of money in order to build something that looked viable. And now with low-code tools and with all of the tools online, and especially with the advent of some of these new AI tools, fraught though they may be, they do allow people to iterate very quickly and develop a prototype that back in the day would have cost quite a bit of money.
Yeah, totally agree. I talk about that quite often. I think it's very overlooked, under the concept that I continually come back to is there was this really interesting perfect storm moment where cloud infrastructure was becoming viable And at the same time, open source code bases were being leveraged to build proprietary tools. And when those two things came together, very much to your point, something that used to take a room full of servers and a room full of engineers could suddenly be done overnight by a group of two or three people. And I think it's continued to move in that direction with low code, no code. And obviously now, if you have any number of AI agents helping you code a thing, you can move even faster today. So that was a really critical turning point in Portland, both from the just how fast people could build things or how quickly they could explore interesting ideas, but also it changed the dynamic from all of the startup activity happening in the suburbs where there was way more affordable real estate to people being able to gravitate toward downtown Portland and build within the city core because they didn't need as much real estate to build out a company.
Absolutely. So, Pi, when you started, you were supporting founders who were at one end of the journey, and the journey
Mhm,
has changed. And so, Pi
mhm.
has changed as well. So, what kind of experimental things are you doing this year and possibly even next year to kind of sort out where the world is going and help people get there?
Yeah, great question. Like, I think in my analysis of the community, what came into sharp relief is Portland is exceptional at doing aspirational, inspirational events. We have any number of organizations in town who are working very hard, be they OEN, the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, or TAO, the Technology Association of Oregon, or Upstart Collective that hosts an event called Demolicious that allows founders to get on stage and pitch what they're doing. Like in that aspect, our community is really well served. But on either side of that, there seem to be gaps. So, like, very, very top of the funnel activity. Like, I'm a person in Portland, I don't even know where to go or how to get connected. Like,
Yeah.
how do we create enough noise and momentum for those people to feel included and engaged in the community? That's one of the experiments we're going to run on probably like a quarterly basis. And then we're also going to look at the other side, which is you've done pitch competitions or you've done some boot camp level work. How do we continue to support those founders who are really not in a pejorative way, are really like heads down and busy trying to build
Mhm.
something, but they still need help. And it's hard for them to like pick their head up and engage with community in an effective way. And so we need to figure out how to deliver enough value to that part of the community that we're supporting those folks with the things they need at that stage.
Right. So maybe the stage that people need support in has changed or the
Right.
ground has changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. To your point, the challenge with Pi became that because founders had all of these potential technologies or creative outlets to build product, they were able to get to something functional and meaningful a lot more quickly than they had previously.
Yeah.
And yet, it was almost like big. Like Tom Hanks becoming an adult when he was really a child, it was like they hadn't had time to develop the business acumen or the understanding of the startup community or maybe how a business was actually built. And so Pi found it very difficult to like really push those companies further faster. They still needed very kind of like business 101, very kind of basic support, which was something different. We weren't equipped to deliver
Mhm.
effectively. And then at the same time, Pi was really privileged to have any number, hundreds of folks who would volunteer time to mentor for us, but they were also very busy professionals, either building their own companies or working at, larger tech companies in town. And, it became unbalanced in that they weren't really interested in providing basic business knowledge. They wanted something that challenged them, that got them thinking
Right,
about
right. They wanted
potential.
something new and exciting from the startup people, and the startup people were like, "Dude, how do I file my taxes?"
Exactly,
Right,
exactly. And Pi was like, what do we do with this? We're like,
right.
we're a marketplace where we're upsetting both sides of the marketplace. We're not satisfying either party's needs effectively. And that's why when I got to the point of like we weren't destined to be a startup accelerator, that was just what we were at the time, and it
Right, right.
would,
That was just the role that you fell into because it was a place that a gap that needed to be filled.
yeah.
The world changed.
Exactly. And so we had to change with it. And part of the beauty of taking 2024 to really just step back and be observational was it also gave a number of other groups the space to explore new concepts in an area where Pi, quite frankly, may have been overbearing or overly noisy in the space that would have prevented or impacted them adversely had we been trying to do programming. So, one great example is, and I think also the demise of PDX Women in Tech, which was also a huge organization in terms
Yeah.
of community development. But I think my favorite example is AI Portland. Like, they've done a phenomenal job in less than a year of building an amazing community that's really engaged, and they're doing really creative programming. I also look to like Rose City Techies, which is taking more of the less of like the pure startup play and more just like people in technology throughout the community. Like, in again, in less than a year, they've created really interesting opportunities and events and programming. And so we spent 2024 saying, how do we amplify the work of others and how do we help give them more momentum or kind of acceleration, if
Mhm.
you will? And, that's come from both like monthly level events, but also kind of like marquee events. Like, the other one I would mention is the Silicon Forest Tech Summit, which took place for the first time last year. And this year they're doing their second event. And, it's a hundreds, if not thousands of people show up kind of event. So
Mhm.
just really interesting to see what happens when you dial down the noise and give people the opportunity to try some new things. So I've been really happy to see that happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that's fantastic about Portland is the collaborative nature of
Mhm.
people who are working here. People really want to help each other versus there can be a little bit more competitiveness, I think, in other domains or
Mhm.
other places. And Portland is very much a, hey, cool idea. How can I help you make it happen?
Yep,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. So you are doing an event next week. I know it's already sold out and you have a waiting list, but what's going to happen at this event?
This is really in the get it in front of customers before you spend too much time on it kind of vein. It's like it's a prototype. It's like,
Mhm.
and really designed in that, kind of experimental way of how much effort does this take? How much money does it take to put together an event with several hundred people to just, this is just mix and mingle, old school networking. Like, just show up,
Mhm.
run into somebody. If I happen to know somebody else who's in the crowd that I think you need to talk to, I'll grab you both by the collar and put you together,
Right,
kind of
right.
thing. But not a lot of structure, not a lot of programming. And because that's what we heard from a significant portion of the community that they needed.
Yeah.
Now, that's not a one size fits all. That's not a perfect solution. I've also received a lot of feedback from people I respect who are like, "Hey, look, we don't need another huge networking event." And
Mhm.
I'm like, you don't need another huge networking event, but there are other people in the community who do. So we're also going to experiment on some more intimate kind of, smaller kind of engagement
Yeah.
events. We're going to have a few. I'll reveal it here because it's in my head and I've been working on programming it. But few kind of like, where are they now level events where we can revisit folks that we've seen on stage at Pitch Black or Pitch Latino or Pi Demo Day or what have you, to give them the opportunity to update the community on where they are and what they need and where people can be helpful. So starting to think about things in that regard, but really just throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall right now, like
Mhm.
trying to figure out, as well as I do, the classic problem of going to somebody and them telling you what they think they need
Mhm.
when that's not actually what they need. So like, we just need to get some stuff out there and figure out what's working for the community.
Got it. Fantastic. Okay. So in the future, we should expect more experiments from Pi then.
Yes. Yeah. More community based experiments. And then, as always, we're more than happy to kind of play that welcome wagon kind of behavior where,
Matchmaker.
yeah, where there
Yeah.
are people who are looking to get connected in the community. We've just been around long enough that we have, a significant number of people who are part of the organization or like
Mhm.
have supported the organization in the past. So we'll continue to do that work, but I can confidently say we will not be hosting an accelerator class in 2025 unless something changes drastically that encourages us to move in that direction. But as far
Okay.
as I can see right now, that's not something that's really needed in the community. Or for the people in the community who have that need, I admittedly would say you are better served by trying to get into Y Combinator or Techstars, which are two major accelerator programs that Pi was fashioned after. It would be hard for me to argue that it would be better for you to go through a Pi accelerator program than one of those
Yeah.
programs.
Got it. So I know, just to push you in that a little bit, I know that places like Pioneer Square Labs up in Seattle and a few other places have started accelerators in different models. And I
Mhm.
know Techstars has been through throes of agony over the last couple of years
Yeah.
as they've shut down various places, including the Seattle one that was very successful for many years. And one of the questionable actions that Techstars took was lots of corporate sponsorship that then kind of changed how they treated startups.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so that's been kind of contorted things a little bit for Techstars. And I think Y Combinator has taken a different model, which has been very successful. Do you think that accelerators may still be a thing here on the West Coast other than Y Combinator?
It's a good question. I mean, you touched on PSL, Pioneer Square Labs. Like they have what they refer to as a venture studio model,
Yeah,
which is slightly different than a traditional accelerator in that they're really putting intensive effort into a company or two at a time and helping staff and guide those companies strategically. So like that model I like a lot and they've been successful with it. I think there's definitely some potential there. I just think, YC has entered the not too big to fail, but just like they've got that engine that just works. They're starting
yeah,
to explore quarterly cohorts now instead of just two cohorts a year. And I think, with the Techstars and I feel this to my soul, like it's hard to figure out how to financially sustain an accelerator model. Like I think we've been lucky over time to figure out ways to do that, but we've never done it at scale, like an
yeah,
organization like that. And I can understand why some decisions were made or why some partnerships were
yeah.
struck because it was keeping the machine alive that was doing work for the support of
Right.
founders.
I'm not saying that people were not doing good things to try to benefit startups. It's
Sure.
just in retrospect, it's easy to look back and go like, "Oh, maybe that was a
Yeah.
decision that took us in a direction that we didn't really want to go."
Right, exactly.
Easy for me to
Yeah.
say. I haven't read Techstars.
But to get to your question, like, do I think there's still potential for an accelerator or accelerator models on the West Coast? Yes, but not ones that were shaped like the previous model. Like, I
Yeah,
think people need to be leaning more into the PSL territory of like, what are other ways we can fund and support early stage companies that are promising? And it's not just a financial commitment. Like
right, right.
there's
It's
got
a
to be more.
strategic commitment. Like I've talked to Julie Sandler some, who
Yeah.
is one of the principals early on at Pioneer Square Labs, and
Mhm.
she's very invested in helping her companies be successful, not just with money, not just with
Right.
advice, but with like strategy and personnel and ensuring that people know which direction to go. Because there's so much more to running a company than just you have a product, you have some money, go.
Right.
There's
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
lot of gaps in there to fill.
Yeah, and I think they also have the opportunity, if not luxury, of having access to deal flow for companies that are venture scale pursuits. And I think the other challenge we sometimes face in Portland is people can be solving really interesting problems. They can be building really amazing and impactful products, but they're not always at a scale that is attractive to venture capital. They're just not quite big enough or they're not addressing a big enough problem. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't figure out ways to support those folks and their efforts because they still have meaningful impact on our community and people here. And so we often are kind of forced to figure things out without, it's an incomplete ecosystem where we don't have all the pieces. So we have to figure out how to kind of hack our way into making it work without all the elements that are necessary to be truly successful.
Interesting. Yeah. Got it. Well, anything else that we should know about where Pi is going or where you see Portland going with the startup ecosystem this year?
On the pie front, I mean, wait and see. We don't know what we're doing. We've never known what we're doing. We're just an experiment. We're like, this might work.
Yeah.
Maybe we should try it. And if it doesn't, we stop doing it and we try something new. So I think what people, I would honestly be super valuable to me is just feedback. From people, like if you engage with Pi or you think there's something Pi could be doing that we should experiment with. I always love that feedback. We're consistently open to that feedback. We're not experts in this. We're just trying to help move things along. And I think in the Portland startup community, like one of the things I'm most looking forward to is and it's a broader kind of spectrum issue within the industry, but it's like AI is moving out of that kind of like crazy hot technology space into like, how do we actually employ this
Yeah.
technology in an effective way? And, I think for the most part, I felt Portland has largely been further behind the curve than it usually is with new technologies. So I've been here since the mid 90s. We were early to the web, we were early to cloud, we were early to mobile, we were early to open source, and we were late, exceptionally late on AI. And yet I've seen the community start to kind of catch up and get around like what the potential of this kind of infrastructure is. And so much in the same way we talked about the cloud being impactful to startups and efficiency and the number of people you need, I think we're going to see the impact of AI and how that makes things more efficient for startup founders and how they do the work that they do. And I think for the Portland startup community, the most promising aspect of that is how much you can get done with little to no capital investment. And that continues to be the thing we find most challenging is that early stage funding that really helps those nascent companies get a foothold. Like we don't have the luxury of that kind of capital around here. So anything that improves founders' ability to get to market, start generating revenue, like all of those aspects are always valuable for Portland. And so I'm hoping we continue to see that momentum. And I think the other thing I'm excited about is coming out of the pandemic, I was like, 2023, community is going to start coming back. It's good. And the events are going to start, things are going to say, and it didn't happen. And I was like, 2024, that's totally going to happen. And it didn't happen. But so I'll say it yet again, third time's a charm. 2025, I believe the community is really going to come back, gain momentum, and we're going to see some really interesting things.
Well, I think there's been some great seeds planted in 2023 and in 2024, and maybe we're going to see the fruit of those seeds blossom this year. Yeah,
hopefully. Yeah, I hope so.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, really appreciate your time, Rick.
Of course.
Your insight, and I wish you all the best with Pi, and hopefully we can do this in person sometime soon.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Thanks to our guests today for their insights into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We wish you all the best in your startup journey. The Dare Show is brought to you by the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network and by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. Visit us at oen.org or at darwaf.io. Thanks again for listening. Till next time.